The message and the objective of Command & Conquer Generals was clear: to bring the CNC franchise into the 21st century. It was a clear break from the old, and that's a dangerous thing to attempt in the video game industry. It is a well-established fact among CNC fans that EA killed Command & Conquer. I think it's time we took a closer look at that well-established fact. Did EA really kill Command & Conquer? Was Generals a massive step down from what came before? I'm Strategy Tom, and this is the classic review of Command & Conquer Generals. A new era for Command & Conquer was ushered in with a brand new gaming world. Generals does not focus on the Tiberian Wars, nor the Allied Soviet conflicts of Red Alert. There is a brand new story that attempts to draw from real world issues and tensions. Being released in 2003, Generals was keen to draw from the contemporary political situation and is in no small way influenced by the ongoing War on Terror. In the world of Generals, there are now 3 factions, the state of affairs that would continue into the later Tiberium and Red Alert sequels. In Generals, there is China, the United States, and the Global Liberation Army, which is a Middle Eastern faction which seems to be a conglomeration of all the various warlords and terrorist organisations throughout the region. As one united faction, the GLA controls large swathes of the Middle East, and they have started to feel confident that they can throw out the global imperialist oppressors that are China and the US. The story of Generals is simple, in so much that there are simply 3 factions vying for dominance of the region. The way that Generals innovated, however, is that all 3 individual campaigns are canonical, unlike previous Command & Conquer titles, wherein only the quote-unquote good guys' victory is taken forward story-wise into the later games. In Generals, when selecting a campaign to play, you may choose any of the 3 factions, but you are presented with a clear order in which you are supposed to play them. In the first campaign, China, the GLA launches a devastating surprise attack on Beijing, causing huge casualties and destruction. Throughout the campaign, you push back the GLA and deal a devastating blow to their operations. The second campaign, the GLA, picks up immediately where you left off with China, and you now play as the GLA attempting to pick themselves back up and take the fight back to the Chinese and the Americans. In the third and final campaign, you play as the USA, who must drive back the newly resurgent GLA and destroy them for good. Or, until the story in the expansion pack 0 Hour happens. I really love this new way of having multiple campaigns without having to disregard the story implications of your hard work going forward into the sequel. Not that Generals would get a sequel, mind you. I think this new story may have been dismissed by many Command & Conquer fans, perhaps seen as one new storyline too many, had Generals not been so fantastic. Sorry that I'm giving away review spoilers here, but it really is fantastic. There are also some that criticise Generals for hitting a little too close to home with the real life situation in Iraq and Afghanistan. But honestly, I can completely understand why EA did it. Both the Tiberium and Red Alert stories were silly and complicated, with 2 games worth of lore already invested. If you want to get new players hooked onto the series, then you're going to need a clean slate to bring them in, not the 3rd title in what was then a niche series. The General story certainly is the most grounded and realistic of any of the Command & Conquer titles. It takes inspiration from real world events in a way that the previous games simply didn't. That being said, that could also be seen as a negative. Generals doesn't have the big cast of characters, and it completely eliminates the video briefings from previous games, which, in my view, takes away some of the charm and charisma that is so inherent in the Command & Conquer ethos. Overall, it's a very interesting new direction in which to take the series, but I just think there was so much more scope and potential with how that story might have been told. The feeling that Generals is somewhat familiar, yet very different from its predecessors, extends into the gameplay. Like with all Command & Conquer games, the idea is to collect resources which allow you to build a base and an army which will allow you to defeat your enemy. However, there are two key differences. Firstly, is the gathering of resources. While the Tiberium War and Red Alert games have a different resource to collect, the way they work is the same. It's all out there in fields across the map and you send a harvester to collect it. In Generals, the supplies are together in resource piles spread over the map. Similar, yes, but the resources are all in one densely packed area instead of spread out over a field. This means that controlling the areas of the map where there are resources is imperative. It allows you to gain more money, yes, but it also means you are tightening the noose around the enemy, restricting their movements and their access to resources. To aid in this is the second big gameplay change. In all other Command & Conquer games, buildings are built from the construction yard, the central hub of any base. It meant that you were limited by proximity to other existing buildings as to where you could place your structures. In Generals, this is not the case. To quote the American construction dozer,
"I'll build anywhere."
all that is required is for you to get a unit capable of building construction to your desired location, and you can set up structures anywhere on the map. It allows you to set up small outposts anywhere or construct defensive positions in strategically important choke points or around supply piles. As someone who enjoys the base building aspects of these games, I love this about Generals. While those two examples are exclusive to Generals, it did also bring about some new gameplay features that would carry forward into future titles. The ability to purchase upgrades for both units and buildings is a feature that first entered the Command & Conquer franchise in Generals. Generals' focus on controlling key strategic locations also saw the importance of garrisoning civilian buildings. In Red Alert 2, only the basic infantry type could garrison buildings. In Generals, all infantry can garrison buildings, which in turn leads to a greater emphasis on anti-infantry tactics, such as using a flame tank to burn infantry out of their hiding places. I think Generals has just taken the Command & Conquer franchise to another level in terms of the emphasis that is placed on tactics and strategy in order to gain victory. In terms of gameplay, Generals is one of my favourite Command & Conquer games, if not strategy games in their entirety, and I don't think I'm alone with that sentiment. It really is a great shame that we never got a Generals 2. If there is any aspect of Generals where I feel like they did not hit the mark, then it is presentation. That's not to say it's terrible. The two things that I like about Generals is that it does have a cracking soundtrack, and for the first time the graphics engine was rendered in full 3D, marking another innovation for the Command & Conquer franchise. However, all the other things that I love in a Command & Conquer game are missing. Mission briefs are very short audio briefings with some still images during the mission's loading screen. In terms of characters, well, there are none. I actually thought the premise and world building in Generals was pretty good, but with no real characters or story per se, it all feels a little lackluster. Map designs are pretty samey too. Virtually all the missions take place somewhere in the Middle East, so the design and landscape of all the cities start to blend into one another. In real life, I'm sure the Middle East is not one homogeneous place with only one design and culture, but in Generals it is. Some of the China campaigns takes place in China and other places in Central Asia, but this isn't much in terms of variety. Generals also goes further on a trend that started in part with Red Alert 2. It is a feature that others might really enjoy, but irritates me. It's the trend of giving each little individual unit type their own personality. In previous titles, you would click to select a unit and they might say, "Yes sir," and you give them an order and they'd say, "Acknowledged," or something like that. In Red Alert 2, some specialist units got their own voiceover. In Generals, every single unit type has its own voiceover and personality, and I find it a bit silly. Lads, we're meant to be at war here. Why is my flak cannon operator constantly grumpy and complaining at every order that I give? This has also caused somewhat of a trend throughout all future titles. The largest heavy tanks are always voiced by some deep-voiced harbinger of the apocalypse. The fast, lightly armoured scout vehicle is always voiced by some squeaky-voiced idiot who sounds coked up to the nines. And don't forget every flame tank ever, who are universally operated by a maniac. I guess I could just be a bit of a cynic, but it does get grating after a while. I think Generals looks and feels pretty good. There's nothing wrong with it, but it's lacking a little character. Among Command & Conquer fans, Generals is viewed very favourably. It's a game that took a bold step away from what came before and found itself on firm footing. But I also wonder what more could have been made of it. So, how to rate it? The premise, pros, a bold look at contemporary issues. The cons, a complete break from previous games with a new third timeline. The gameplay, an excellent new base building mechanics, and a fresh style of tactical gameplay with strategic points needing to be held. And the cons, some CNC traditionalists may not like the big changes. The presentation, pros, the soundtrack is good, and for the first time in a Command & Conquer game there is fully rendered 3D graphics. The cons, the lack of characters in video briefings makes the game feel soulless, and I do find the unit voices a bit irritating. Generals was an innovative game that ushered Command & Conquer into a new era, and I think it certainly makes us question the idea that EA ruined the Command & Conquer franchise. They certainly came out swinging with a game that is admittedly lacking in certain areas, but overall an excellent experience. And that is why I'm giving Command & Conquer Generals a 7 out of 10. Thank you so much for watching, and wait, what's that? That's 0 hour. Okay, normally I don't do this, but we're dipping our toes back in to take a look at General's expansion pack, 0 hour. Simply put, when I come back to play Generals, I don't play the main game, I play 0 hour. I'm going to point out two main additions, on top of the extra units and levels that 0 hour provides. First one is live action mission briefs. Okay, so it's not the briefings like they usually are, instead taking the form of news reports setting up the story of the mission that you are about to enter. But they're a damn sight better than what we got in the main game. The second and best addition is General's Challenge Mode. Challenge Mode brings 3 new generals to each faction, making 9 in total. These new generals all alter the playstyle and the roster of their faction to their own specific skills. For example, you might choose the US Air Force General, who has elite level air units with new upgrades and abilities. The payoff for this is that he has limited access to armour units with no tanks whatsoever in his roster. At the start of Challenge Mode, you will choose a general to play as and then square off against the others one by one before entering the lair of the Tigress, something of a final boss of a general who has access to the tech of all 3 factions. What I really love is that during the Challenge Mode levels, the opposing generals will start to berate and insult you, before coming angered and then panicked as you start to gain the upper hand. General's Challenge Mode is just so much fun and is pretty much all I ever play when I venture back to Generals. The addition of the live action news reports and, most importantly, the characters of Challenge Mode, for me, it does a lot to make up for the limited failures of the base game. So this time, I'm giving 2 scores. Generals alone may have been a 7 out of 10, but Command & Conquer Generals 0 hour is a 9 out of 10. and I have no hesitation in saying this is one of the best expansion packs I have ever played in terms of what it adds to the base game. Thank you so much for watching. What did you think of Generals? Did you play it back in the day? Be honest, is it just the challenge mode that you keep coming back to? Sound off in the comments below and tell me which game should get the classic review treatment in future. Don't forget to like, share and subscribe. I'm Strategy Tom, and I'll see you next time.